Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
MC gets reborn inside of The Walking Dead after he dies. He has a system that lets him level up as he kills more and more walkers. What will someone with the powers of a system do inside of The Walking Dead?
The Walking Dead, Reborn with a leveling up system from killing zombies. Chapter 1, Cold Asphalt Awakening. The first thing I felt was pain. Not the distant, fading kind. The sharp, full-body kind that told me, very clearly, that I had died and whatever came after did not bother with comfort. I opened my eyes and stared up at a grey sky. "Okay," I muttered quietly, my voice rough. "That's new." I lay there for a second longer, letting sensation settle. My back pressed against cold asphalt. My fingers twitched, then curled. I could feel my legs. My neck worked when I turned my head slightly to the side. No paralysis. No hospital bed. No beeping machines. Just an empty road, cracked and abandoned, with weeds pushing through the edges like they owned the place. The last thing I remembered was headlights. A horn. The sound of brakes failing to matter. "Yeah," I said under my breath, exhaling. "Truck gun strikes again." Of course. I pushed myself up to a seated position and looked around. No buildings close by. A line of trees on one side of the road. An overturned sedan maybe 50 meters away, doors hanging open. No people. No traffic. No noise except wind brushing leaves. My heart rate was steady. Not calm, exactly, but controlled. Panic would be pointless. If this was death, then freaking out would not help. If this was not death, then I needed information. I stood. My body felt light. Responsive. No aches beyond surface soreness. I rolled my shoulders once, then twice, testing range of motion. Everything worked. "Where the fuck am I?" I said flatly. The words echoed more than they should have. That was when I heard it. A wet sound. Slow. Uneven. I turned toward it. Something stepped out from between the trees. It was human-shaped. That was the only generous thing I could say about it. Its posture sagged forward, arms hanging loose, head tilted at an angle that suggested the neck had given up trying. Skin gray. Patches missing. Jaw slack. It took one step. Then another. Slow. Very slow. I stared at it for a second. "No way," I said. The thing let out a low, broken sound that might once have been a voice. Fear hit me then, sharp and immediate. My muscles tensed, breath hitching just slightly. This was not a movie screen. This was in front of me. Real. Moving. But it was still slow. Painfully slow. I took a step back, eyes scanning the area. My gaze landed on something half hidden in the grass near the road shoulder. A length of metal pipe. Rusted. Heavy enough. "Okay," I said quietly, walking toward it without taking my eyes off the thing. "Okay. Let's not overthink this." My fingers closed around the pipe. Cold. Solid. The thing was closer now. Maybe 10 meters away. Its feet dragged instead of lifted. I felt my fear level out into something sharper. Focused. "So," I said, adjusting my grip. "You're real." It reached out with one arm, fingers twitching. I stepped forward instead of back. The distance closed. I swung. The pipe connected with the side of its head with a dull, meaty sound. The impact jolted up my arms. The thing staggered, nearly falling, but did not go down. "Noted," I said, lips tightening. "Harder." I swung again. This time at the temple. The head snapped sideways. The thing collapsed onto the road. It twitched. I did not stop. I brought the pipe down again. And again. And again. Each hit sent a jolt through my arms and shoulders. Bone cracked. Something gave way. Dark fluid splashed onto the asphalt. I kept going until it stopped moving entirely. Then I stood there, breathing hard, pipe hanging loosely in my hand. Silence returned. My heart slowed. My hands were steady. No shaking. That was interesting. Walker, I said after a moment, the word forming on its own. The moment it left my mouth, a sound rang out. Ding! I froze. A translucent notification appeared in front of my eyes. You gained 1 XP for killing 1 walker. I stared at it. Yeah, okay, I said slowly. That tracks. Of course it does. Walker. Not zombie. Not infected. Walker. I exhaled through my nose and rubbed my forehead with my free hand. So I'm in The Walking Dead, I said. Great. Just great. I glanced down at the corpse. Dead. Very dead. Another notification appeared. Respawn Walker? I blinked. What? I reached out instinctively, fingers passing through the air where the word hovered. There was a sensation, like pressing against a button that pushed back. All right, I said, curiosity edging past caution. Let's see what happens. I pressed it. The corpse twitched. Then it moved. Bones pulled themselves back into alignment with wet, unpleasant sounds. Flesh stitched together in ways that made my stomach tighten. The thing rose from the ground, slower than before, and then did something that made me stiffen. It knelt. Head bowed. Hands resting uselessly on its thighs. I stared at it. It did not move. Did not reach. Did not make a sound. Hey, I said. I circled it once, pipe ready. No reaction. I stopped in front of it. Stand, I said. It remained kneeling. Okay, I said. Don't stand. I rubbed my chin, eyes scanning the air again. No new messages. No explanation. So, I said slowly, thinking it through. I kill walkers, I get XP. XP probably boosts my body. Strength. Speed. Maybe more later. The walker stayed still. And when I respawn them, I continued, looking down at it, there, mine. I watched it carefully for any sign of aggression. There was none. Cool, I said finally, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Very cool. I tried again, experimentally. Follow. The walker rose smoothly to its feet and stood in front of me, waiting. I let out a short laugh. Oh, this is going to be useful. I looked around the empty road again, mind already moving. Timeline. Location. Early outbreak? Late? No idea yet. No gunshots in the distance. No helicopters. That suggested early or very isolated. I glanced at my hands again. They felt stronger. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. The pipe felt lighter. XP works fast, I said quietly. I tried again, mentally. System. Status. Menu. Anything. Nothing. No response. No voice. No interface beyond the notifications I had already seen. Silent type, I said. Fine. We'll figure it out as we go. I looked at the walker. You're with me, I said. And you're not biting anyone unless I say so. It stood there. I nodded once. Good talk. I started walking down the road, the walker following a few steps behind. Each footstep felt deliberate. Grounded. Real. My brain ran through canon automatically. Atlanta. CDC. Rick in a coma. If this was early, then supplies mattered. Weapons mattered. Staying unnoticed mattered. And having a personal walker army, I added under my breath, definitely matters. I adjusted my grip on the pipe and kept moving, eyes scanning the tree line. Whatever this was, whatever rules were in play, I was alive. And I had work to do. Chapter 2, 10 Bodies Standing. The 10th walker dropped slower than the others. Not because it fought harder. Not because it learned anything. It was slower because I was not tired. Not sloppy. Just deliberate. The metal pipe came down once, twice, 3 times, each strike placed where it needed to be. The skull gave in. The body collapsed. No surprises. No mess I had not already seen 9 times before. I stood over it, chest rising evenly, pipe resting against my shoulder. 10, I said quietly. The road was littered with bodies now. Some sprawled in the weeds, some collapsed half on asphalt, half in dirt. All of them still. All of them waiting. Ding. The sound was familiar now. You gained 1 XP for killing 1 walker. I rolled my neck once and glanced at the translucent numbers hovering faintly at the edge of my vision. 10 XP. Double digits, I said with mild satisfaction. Look at me go. I crouched beside the corpse and pressed the prompt without hesitation. Respawn walker? Yes, I said, tapping it. The body convulsed and rebuilt itself like the others had. Slower than I would have liked, but consistent. When it finished, it joined the line. 10 walkers now stood behind me. Not wandering. Not moaning. Just waiting. I turned and looked at them properly for the first time. They were not identical. Damage remained. Missing ears. Torn cheeks. One dragged its foot slightly even after restoration. Another's jaw hung crooked. But they all stood straight enough. Obedient enough. I walked down the line, stopping in front of each one. You, I said to the first, pointing. Don't wander. It stayed still. You, I said to the second. Stay close. It shifted half a step toward me and stopped. I smiled faintly. Good listeners. The situation was still terrible. Dead world. No safety. No backup. No supplies beyond a rusted pipe and whatever was left in abandoned cars. But this part? This part worked. I turned back toward the road, scanning the distance. Still no signs of people. Still no gunshots. Still no movement except wind and leaves. That was when the sound came again. Ding. I stiffened slightly, eyes snapping forward. A larger notification appeared, clearer than the others. Host, you have awakened build. Oh, I said. The word came out calm. Curious. Interested. I waited. Nothing else followed. All right, I said, looking around as if the system might be shy. Hi. Questions. Many questions. No reply. I sighed softly. Yet. Of course. Silent treatment. I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly. System, what does build do? Nothing. System, am I about to explode? Nothing. System, blink once if you're ignoring me on purpose. Nothing. I snorted. Shit system. Still, the notification lingered. When I focused on it, it expanded. A layout unfolded in front of my eyes, layered and clean, like a design someone had spent time on. Stats. Categories. Numbers. Okay, I said, interest sharpening. Now we're talking. I took a step to the side of the road, waving my walkers into a loose semicircle facing outward. They moved when I gestured. Crude, but effective. Guard, I said calmly. They stopped and turned slightly, backs toward me, facing the tree line and road edges. I nodded once. Good. Then I focused fully on the build interface. At the top, clear and unavoidable. Available XP, 10. Below that, branches. Physical. Mental. Knowledge. Subordinates. I leaned slightly against a road sign and began scrolling through it with small flicks of my fingers. Let's see what you've got, I murmured. Physical attributes expanded first. Strength. Speed. Reaction time. Endurance. Durability. Fine motor control. Each had a baseline value. Each had a plus sign next to it. I tapped mental attributes next. IQ. Battle IQ. Memory. Focus. Emotional regulation. Then knowledge. This one branched further the moment I touched it. General knowledge. Medical. Engineering. Biology. Veterinary. Tactical doctrine. Languages. History. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. That's a lot. Finally, subordinates. A list appeared immediately. Walker 001. Walker 002. Walker 003. All the way down to Walker 010. Each with their own basic stats. Low. Very low. I straightened slightly, pipe resting against the ground. So, I said, thinking aloud. XP can go into me. Or into them. I glanced back at the line of walkers. Good to know. I considered knowledge for a brief moment. Medicine would be useful. Engineering too. Being able to build things would matter later. But later was not now. Right now, I needed to not die. And in this world, that meant speed, strength, and not getting caught off guard. All right, I said. Simple math. I tapped speed and held my finger there. Allocate XP? Yes. I slid the value up. The moment the third point locked in, I felt it. Not dramatic. No flash. No surge. Just a clean shift. My legs felt lighter. My balance adjusted automatically. The way my weight rested on my feet changed. I took a step forward. Then another. Faster than before. Not superhuman. Just, better. Nice, I said quietly. I tapped strength next. The change was heavier this time. My shoulders settled differently. My grip tightened unconsciously around the pipe, and I realized I was holding it too tight. I loosened my fingers slightly. Okay, I said. That's noticeable. Then reaction time. The world sharpened. Not visually. Temporally. I snapped my fingers in front of my face and watched them come together with an odd clarity. The motion felt slower than it should have. Yeah, I said, lips curling faintly. I like that. I glanced back at the XP counter. Available XP, 1. 1 left, I said. I looked at the remaining categories again. IQ tempted me. Battle IQ 2. Knowledge branches sat there, waiting. But then I tapped subordinates again. The list appeared. I selected Walker 001. The first one I had killed. The first one I had brought back. Its stat page opened. Strength. Speed. Durability. Obedience. All low. Barely above 0. I smiled slightly. Let's see what happens, I said. I tapped Strength. Allocate XP to Walker 001? Yes. The XP counter dropped to 0. For a half second, nothing happened. Then the walker jerked. Muscles under its torn skin tightened. Its arms thickened, pushing against rotting flesh. The chest expanded slightly, ribs pressing outward. The skin stretched and split in a few places, revealing darker muscle underneath. The walker let out a low sound. Not a moan. Just breath moving through ruined lungs. It straightened. It looked bigger. Stronger. And noticeably more unsettling. Oh, I said, watching closely. That's effective. I stepped closer, circling it slowly. The walker remained still, head tracking me just slightly. Its hands were larger now. Fingers thicker. Nails cracked and sharp. Yeah, I said, smirking. You're terrifying. I stopped in front of it and looked up into its ruined face. You're my frontliner, I said calmly. It did not respond. It did not need to. I stepped back and glanced at the rest of them. So the system isn't shit, I said. Just rude. No response came, but I did not mind. I rolled my shoulders again, feeling the difference. My movements were smoother. Faster. Controlled. The pipe felt almost too light now. I jogged forward a few steps, stopped, turned, jogged back. No strain. No stumble. Good, I said softly. I raised my voice just enough for the walkers to hear. Formation, I said. They shuffled, responding slowly, but they did move. Walker 001 naturally ended up closer to the front. I adjusted them with gestures, stepping in and out, repositioning without urgency. All of you, I said, tone casual. Stay quiet. Stay close. Don't attack unless I say so. They stood. I nodded once. My eyes moved to the trilene again. Somewhere out there were more walkers. Somewhere farther out were people. Groups. Camps. Names I already knew. Rick. Shane. Glenn. Atlanta. Not yet. Not now. Right now, I had 10 walkers, a pipe, and a system that rewarded preparation. I exhaled slowly and adjusted my stance. All right, I said quietly. Let's keep moving. I stepped forward, my small army falling in behind me, the road stretching ahead, empty and open. Chapter 3, Numbers on the Move. I did not hesitate when I split the group. All right, I said calmly, lifting 2 fingers and pointing down the road. You 8. With him. Walker 001 stepped forward immediately. Bigger than the rest. Shoulders broader. Arms hanging heavier at his sides. I pointed again, slower this time. Straight down. Kill anything that moves. Stay together. The walkers shifted, responding to the intent behind the gesture more than the motion itself. 8 of them fell in behind Walker 001 without confusion. I felt it the moment they turned away. A light pull. Not physical. Not pressure. Just awareness stretching outward, like knowing where your hand is even when you are not looking at it. Interesting, I said quietly. I turned to the remaining 2 walkers beside me. You're with me. They stepped closer. I nodded once. Good. We moved off the road and into the scattered buildings nearby. Low structures. Gas station. Convenience store with broken windows and a collapsed door. The inside smelled like rot and old food. Shelves were half empty. Some things looted. Some left behind because people did not think they would need them. People were bad at planning when afraid. "All right," I said, tapping a duffel bag with my foot. "You carry." One walker bent down awkwardly as I shoved the bag toward it. The other took the second bag without instruction when I handed it over. "See," I said lightly. "Teamwork." I moved through the store methodically. Bottled water. Canned food. A flashlight that still worked. Batteries. A cheap knife behind the counter. I took it and tested the weight. "Better than nothing," I said, sliding it into my belt. Outside, a walker staggered toward the broken entrance. I stepped out and swung the pipe once. Clean hit. It went down. Ding. "You gained 1 XP for killing one walker." Before I could even think about it, one of my walkers stepped forward and crushed the skull under its heel. Ding. Another notification followed immediately. I blinked. "Wait," I said. The information settled into place without explanation. The kill counted. Not just for the walker. For me. I straightened slowly. "So anything they kill," I said, eyes flicking toward the distant road where the other group had gone, "counts as mine." I smiled faintly. "That's efficient." I pressed the respawn prompt out of habit, watching the body rebuild and join my growing number. I continued moving. More walkers wandered in ones and twos. None fast. None aware. They died easily. Sometimes by my hand. Sometimes by theirs. Each time, the XP ticked upward. I stopped behind a building after a while, leaning against the wall and checking the total. 27 XP. "Hey," I said. I did the math quickly. The split group had been busy. I tapped build again. The interface opened smoothly. "All right," I said, tone casual. "Let's reinvest." I started with strength. Up. 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 More than before. The system allowed it. My muscles tightened, not painfully, just firmly. My stance adjusted without me telling it to. Then speed. Then reaction time again. Then weapon handling caught my eye. I tapped it. The knife at my belt suddenly felt more familiar. The pipe in my hand aligned better with my grip. Angles made sense without calculation. "That's handy," I said. Endurance. Stamina. I invested until the XP counter hit 0. The changes settled into me like they belonged there. I jogged forward, then stopped abruptly. No wobble. No delay. I swung the pipe experimentally. Faster. Heavier. Controlled. "Okay," I said quietly. "That's a lot." I looked down at my hands. They were still my hands. Same skin. Same scars. But the strength under them was not normal anymore. Compared to the average person? Not close. I exhaled slowly and motioned my walkers forward again. We moved down the road toward a low rise. That was when I saw them. The horde. Dozens. Maybe more. Packed together loosely, spilling out of the trees and across the road ahead. They moved slowly, but there were enough of them that it would have been a problem before. 2 days ago, I would have turned around. 2 days ago, I would have been calculating escape routes. Now? I stopped walking and just looked at them. "That's a lot of XP, I said calmly. One of the walkers beside me let out a low sound. Relax, I said. I've got this. I reached out mentally, focusing on the thread that connected me to the split group. Come here, I thought. The response was immediate. Not words. Not images. Just motion turning toward me. They're on their way, I said quietly. I stepped forward. The horde noticed me then. Heads turned. Bodies shifted. The slow, collective pull toward movement began. I rolled my shoulders once and adjusted my grip on the pipe. All right, I said evenly. Let's do this clean. I raised my voice slightly. You too. Stay close. Hit what I point at. They moved into position without hesitation. The first walker reached me. I stepped inside its reach and drove the pipe straight through its face. Bone cracked. It dropped. Ding. Another came from the side. I turned and kicked it in the knee. The leg folded. I crushed its skull with a downward strike. No strain. No pause. I moved forward into the horde instead of backing away. Yeah, I said under my breath. This works. They surrounded me loosely, arms reaching, mouths opening. I ducked under one grab and drove my shoulder into another walker's chest, sending it staggering backward into two more. I swung. Heads broke. Bodies fell. My walkers followed behind me, stepping into gaps, finishing what I did not. Each kill stacked. Each respawn added to the crowd behind me. I felt the second group arrive before I saw them. Walker 001 slammed into the edge of the horde like a truck, tearing a walker in half with raw force. The others followed, ripping and crushing with increasing efficiency. Show off, I said lightly. I turned, grabbed another walker by the head, and twisted until the neck snapped. The horde thinned quickly. They were still slow. They were still predictable. And now, they were outmatched. I moved through them steadily, breathing even, movements precise. No wasted motion. No panic. By the time the last walker fell, the road was covered in bodies. I stood still, pipe resting against the ground, chest rising once. Ding! 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 The notifications stacked quietly. I looked at the numbers again. Higher. Much higher. I exhaled and glanced at my army, now significantly larger. Yeah, I said. This is manageable. I turned toward the horizon, already thinking about the next move. Chapter 4, Strangers at the Fence. I split off without overthinking it. No pause. No internal debate. Just a decision and movement to match it. Most of the walkers drifted away in small groups, spreading out along roads and through tree lines, quiet and effective. I kept only a handful with me. Close enough to matter. Far enough not to draw attention from miles out. All right, I said casually, glancing back at them as we walked. You guys stick close. No biting unless I say so. They followed. The land shifted gradually as I moved. Less open road, more fields. Fences appeared. Old ones. Newer ones patched together with wire and boards. The smell changed too. Animals. Crops. People. Farm, I said, recognizing it immediately. Herschel's. The house came into view after another stretch of walking. White. Clean. Too clean for the world outside its fences. The barn sat off to the side, big and quiet. And there they were. People. Armed. Tired. Spread out but alert. Rick's group had just arrived. The tension was still fresh on them. New place. Unknown rules. Hope mixed with suspicion. I slowed my pace deliberately, hands loose at my sides. My walkers stopped when I stopped, standing behind me in a rough line. I stepped forward into view. Immediately, guns came up. Rick was near the front. Hat. Beard trimmed. Eyes sharp. He had that posture already. The one where he tried to look calm while preparing for things to go wrong. Shane stood slightly to his side, shoulders tense, jaw set. He looked ready to shoot first and ask questions later. Daryl was there too, crossbow raised, eyes narrowed. Glenn hovered closer to the house, glancing between people like he was trying to figure out how bad this could get. Herschel wasn't out yet. Just the group. I raised both hands slowly, palms out. Easy, I said cheerfully. I come in peace. Mostly. Rick's voice came firm and controlled. That far enough. I stopped. My walkers halted behind me. There was a beat of silence as everyone took that in. Shane spoke next, sharp and loud. You bring them things any closer, we put you down. All of you. I smiled a little. Not wide. Not mocking. Just relaxed. Yeah, I said. That's fair. They make bad first impressions. Daryl shifted his aim slightly. They with you? Very much so, I replied easily. Rick studied me more closely now. Not just the walkers. Me. My posture. My tone. The fact that I wasn't sweating or shaking or shouting. What do you want? Rick asked. I tilted my head, considering how to phrase it. I was gonna ask if I could come along, I said lightly. That landed about as well as expected. Shane let out a short laugh, harsh and humorless. No. Daryl snorted. Hell no. Rick didn't laugh, but his eyes hardened. You can't stay here. Not with them. I shrugged. Worth asking. Shane stepped forward half a pace. You bring walkers up to a place with kids, families. Whoa, I said, cutting in gently. Nobody brought anything anywhere. They're standing. Not lunging. Not chewing. Very well behaved, actually. Daryl frowned. They don't act right. Yeah, I said. They get that a lot. Rick raised a hand slightly, calming his people. His voice stayed level. You need to move on. This isn't a camp for strangers. I nodded once, like I accepted that. Then Glenn spoke up, hesitant but curious. How are they not attacking you? I glanced at him. Good vibes. Shane scoffed. Bullshit. I smiled at him. Language. That did it. Shane stepped forward fully now, gun aimed squarely at my chest. Last warning. Get the hell out of here. I looked down at the gun, then back up at his face. Then I sighed softly. Okay, I said. Plan B. Before anyone could react, I moved. To them, it looked impossible. One moment I was standing 10 feet away. The next, I was behind them. Not sprinting. Not lunging. Just there. I placed one hand on Shane's shoulder. The other on Daryl's. My grip wasn't crushing. It didn't need to be. Just firm enough that they felt it instantly. They froze. Every gun swung wildly. Rick spun around, eyes wide, weapon coming up too late. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm and conversational, close enough that they could hear it clearly. I can help you too, I said pleasantly, by not killing you too. Silence slammed down hard. I felt Shane tense under my hand, muscles locking up. Daryl sucked in a sharp breath, every instinct screaming at him to move and realizing he couldn't. Rick's voice cut through, strained. Get your hands off them. Now. I lifted both hands immediately and stepped back 2 paces, giving them space again. No problem, I said easily. See? Cooperative. Shane spun around, gun shaking just a little now, eyes wild. How the hell did you? Walked, I replied. Daryl stared at me, then at the distance I'd crossed. His expression wasn't fear exactly. It was calculation mixed with something uneasy. Nobody moves like that. Some people do, I said. Rick took a breath, steadying himself. He looked between me and the walkers again, then back to me. You don't want to hurt us, Rick said carefully. No, I agreed. If I did, we'd be having a very different conversation. Shane snapped, you threatening us? I tilted my head. I'm explaining the math. There was another long pause. The walkers behind me hadn't moved an inch. That bothered them more than anything else. Glenn finally broke the silence. Rick, maybe we should hear him out. Shane shot him a look. You serious? Glenn swallowed. He could have done something already. He didn't. Rick considered that. Then he nodded once. All right. You talk. I smiled again, a little wider this time. Thank you. I gestured back toward my small group. I keep them leashed. They don't come near your fences. They don't go near your people. Deal. Rick didn't answer right away. Herschel's voice carried from behind now. What's going on out there? He stepped into view, shotgun in hand, eyes sharp and assessing. Rick turned slightly. Stranger showed up. Says he wants to stay. Herschel's gaze moved to me. Then to the walkers. His mouth tightened. That's not possible, Herschel said flatly. I met his eyes calmly. Yet here we are. Herschel studied me for a long moment. You controlling them? Managing, I said. Another silence. Rick finally spoke. You stay outside the fence. For now. We'll talk. I nodded. Fair. I took a few steps back, motioning for my walkers to sit. They did, sinking down awkwardly into the grass. Everyone watched that happen. Shane muttered under his breath, this is fucked. I heard him. I smiled. I stayed where I was, relaxed, hands loose, eyes on the group as they talked quietly among themselves. This was good. This was exactly where I needed to be. Chapter 5, Through the Gate. Rick didn't rush the conversation. That told me a lot about him. He kept his distance at first, standing just inside the fence while I stayed out, my walkers sitting quietly in the grass like badly behaved statues. The rest of the group lingered behind him in loose positions, weapons lowered but not put away. Shane hovered close, eyes never leaving me. Daryl leaned against the fence rail, crossbow still in hand. Glenn hovered near Maggie, who had joined them silently, arms crossed, gaze sharp and curious. Rick cleared his throat. You said you're willing to keep them outside. Yep, I said easily. They're not big on social gatherings anyway. Shane muttered, bullshit, under his breath. I glanced at him. You say that like it's your catchphrase. Rick ignored that. You stay inside. Alone. No walkers past the fence. Sure, I said. I don't need them breathing down my neck. Herschel stepped closer now, eyes fixed on me. And if they come toward the house? They won't, I replied. If they do, that's on me. Herschel studied my face, looking for something. Fear. Arrogance. Lies. I let him look. I stood relaxed, hands loose, posture open. Rick nodded slowly. You don't touch anyone here. You don't tell anyone what to do. You follow our rules. I shrugged. Your house, your rules. Another pause. Rick held my gaze a moment longer, then turned slightly and nodded to Herschel. Herschel exhaled through his nose. All right. You can come in. But they stay out there. Deal, I said happily. I turned and gestured with 2 fingers. You guys stay. Don't wander. Don't eat anything. I'll be back. They remained seated, unmoving. That got another round of uneasy looks. I walked toward the fence. Shane stiffened as I approached, hand tightening on his gun. I stopped just short of him and raised an eyebrow. Relax. If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Rick shot me a warning look. Easy. I smiled and stepped through the gate when Herschel opened it. The moment I crossed inside, the air felt different. Safer. Cleaner. Tense in a human way instead of a dead one. I glanced around openly. The farmhouse. The yard. The RV parked off to the side. Kids' voices faint in the distance. Carl. Sophia. I knew where they were without seeing them. Andrea stood near the porch, arms folded, eyes sharp. Carol hovered nearby, worry etched into her face. Lori stood close to Rick, watching me carefully, one hand resting lightly at her side. All right, I said lightly, spreading my hands. Hi, everyone. I'm the guy you just almost shot. No one laughed. Glenn shifted awkwardly. So, what do we call you? I blinked. Oh. Right. Names. I gave him a casual smile. Call me Alex. It slid off my tongue easily. Rick nodded once. I'm Rick. This is my group. I figured, I replied. You've got leader posture. Shane bristled. You got a smart mouth. Occupational hazard, I said cheerfully. Daryl snorted despite himself, then caught it and scowled. Rick gestured toward the house. You hungry? I tilted my head. That depends. Is the food better than canned beans? Maggie answered dryly, yes. Then absolutely. We moved toward the house together. The group didn't crowd me, but they didn't relax either. I noticed how they positioned themselves. How Rick subtly stayed between me and the kids' voices. How Shane stayed close enough to react fast. Inside, the house smelled like food and wood and soap. Real soap. I took my shoes off at the door without being asked. That earned a few looks. Habit, I said lightly. Herschel watched me closely as we sat at the table. Plates were set. Simple food. Bread. Meat. Vegetables. I sat when they did. Didn't reach for anything until Rick nodded. Thank you, I said sincerely, and ate. The food was good. I ate calmly, not rushing, not guarding my plate. I talked while I ate, keeping my tone light. So, I said between bites. You folks just get here. Rick nodded. Not long ago. Nice place, I said. Quiet. Defensible. Herschel stiffened slightly. Rick noticed. Shane frowned. You military? Nope. Law enforcement? Also nope. Rick watched me. Then how do you know about defense? I shrugged. You pick things up. Andrea leaned forward slightly. Like controlling walkers. I met her gaze. That too. Carol finally spoke, voice soft. How long have you been out there? Long enough, I replied gently. Lori studied me. Where are you from? I smiled. Far. That answer didn't satisfy her, but she let it go. The conversation drifted after that. Small things. Where people came from. What they did before. I kept my answers short and vague. True enough to pass. Empty enough not to invite questions. I joked lightly when things got tense. Backed off when Rick's expression warned me I was pushing it. At one point, Carl peeked around the corner. I noticed immediately. I smiled at him. Hey! He froze, then ducked back behind the wall. Rick shot me a look. Don't. Wasn't going to, I said calmly. Dinner ended without incident. Outside, dusk crept in. Rick walked me to the porch. The others lingered nearby, listening without pretending not to. You understand, Rick said carefully, this is temporary. I nodded. Everything is. He watched me closely. You help us, you don't make trouble, we'll see. That's fair, I said easily. He hesitated, then extended his hand. I took it. Firm grip. Honest. Tired. Welcome, Rick said. Glad to be here, I replied. I stepped back, hands sliding into my pockets, gaze drifting toward the fence where my walkers still sat motionless. They waited. So did I. Chapter 6, Night that Shook the Fields. Night settled over the farm slowly. Not the quiet kind. Not the peaceful kind people remembered from before. This night came with weight. With distant sounds that never fully went away. Crickets layered under far-off groans, the occasional snap of something moving where it shouldn't. I was sitting on the porch rail, leaning back on my hands, watching the stars like they still mattered, when Rick came out of the house. He didn't say my name at first. He just stood there for a moment, hands on his hips, staring out toward the fields. That sound been there long? He asked. I tilted my head, listening. Low. Constant. A slow, uneven chorus. Hour, maybe more, I replied casually. It's getting louder though. Rick nodded once, jaw tight. Daryl and Shane just came back. There's a horde moving this way. I glanced at him. How big? Big, he said. 100. Maybe more. That got my attention. Not fear. Just focus. People started filtering out of the house behind him. Shane first, already keyed up. Lori close behind, Carl half hidden at her side. Andrea, Daryl, Glenn. Herschel came out last, shotgun in hand, face set hard. Shane wasted no time. We need to move. Now. Herschel shook his head sharply. This is my land. Rick raised a hand, trying to keep things level. If that many walkers hit the fence. They won't, I said. Every head turned toward me. Rick frowned slightly. What? I straightened up and hopped down from the porch, dusting my hands on my jeans. I'll handle it, I said lightly. Shane laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. You serious? Very. Rick studied my face. You said there were limits. There are, I replied. This isn't one of them. Daryl crossed his arms. You talkin' about those things outside the fence? Partly, I said. Mostly about me. Herschel stepped forward. No offense, son, but you don't take on a herd like that alone. I smiled at him. Good thing I'm not alone. Rick held my gaze. If this goes wrong. It won't, I said calmly. You stay here. Keep everyone inside. If you feel the ground shake, don't panic. Shane stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You hear yourself right now. I stepped past them toward the gate. Rick called out, "Wait!" I stopped and turned back. He hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "If you can't stop it, come back. Don't be a hero." I nodded once. "Fair." Then I walked out into the night. The walkers were waiting where I'd left them earlier. Sitting. Standing. Some leaned slightly, like dogs that had been told to stay too long. "All right," I said quietly. "Showtime." They rose at once. I moved away from the fence at an easy pace, boots crunching softly over dirt and gravel. The sound of the horde grew clearer with every step. Not frantic. Just relentless. I paused near the edge of the field and focused inward. The system responded instantly. The numbers were high. I didn't react outwardly. Didn't grin. Didn't laugh. "Okay," I murmured. "You've been busy." The distant groups. The roaming packs. They'd been tearing through walkers non-stop. Over 1,000 points sat there, waiting. I flexed my fingers once. "Let's make this quick." I dumped a chunk into strength first. Then more. Then speed. Reaction time. Durability. Endurance. Stamina. Weapon handling again, even though I wasn't carrying anything now. The changes hit harder this time. My body adjusted with a low, internal pressure. Not pain. Just density. Weight settling in the right places. My balance shifted so smoothly I barely noticed it. I took a step forward and felt the ground respond. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That'll do." The horde crested the rise ahead of me moments later. Dozens upon dozens of walkers spilled into view. Arms out. Heads lolling. Bodies packed together tight enough that they bumped into one another. They saw me. They came. I didn't move. I planted my feet shoulder-width apart and rolled my neck once. "All right," I said evenly. One punch. The first walker reached me. I swung. Not wild. Not rushed. Just a straight punch forward. The impact was decisive. The shockwave didn't stop at the first body. It tore through the mass behind it, ripping walkers apart in a violent line. Bodies burst. Limbs flew. Heads snapped back and vanished into the night. The ground cracked. The sound hit the farm a second later. A deep, rolling boom that rattled windows and shook the porch boards. I stood there as the dust settled. The field was empty. No walkers standing. No walkers crawling. Just scattered remains and silence. I exhaled once. "Messy," I said. Ding. The notifications stacked fast. XP flooded in. I ignored it. Instead, I raised a hand and tapped the respawn prompt. Once. Then again. Then again. The field began to move. Bodies rebuilt themselves in waves. Hundreds of walkers rising, kneeling, standing. Waiting. I gestured sharply toward the far horizon. "Go," I said. "That way. Kill everything that isn't us." They turned as one and began to march. The sound of them faded slowly into the distance. I dusted my hands again and turned back toward the farm. Lights were on now. People stood on the porch. On the roof. Near the fence. Every eye was on me as I walked back. Rick met me at the gate, face tight. "The hell was that?" he asked. I shrugged lightly as I stepped inside. "Just a little party trick." Shane stared past me into the darkness. "There were hundreds." "Yep. And now there's not," Daryl said quietly. Rick looked at the empty field, then back at me. "You just punched them." Pretty much. No one spoke for a long moment. Herschel finally exhaled slowly. You're not normal. I smiled politely. Never claimed to be. Rick rubbed his face with one hand, tired. All right. Everyone back inside. We'll talk in the morning. As they moved, I glanced once more toward the dark horizon where my walkers had gone. Busy night. Chapter 7, Rules over Breakfast. Morning came like the world was pretending nothing happened. The sun rose clean and bright over the fields. Birds made noise like they had not received the memo that everything was dead now. The air smelled like grass and animals and breakfast. I sat on the bottom step of the porch with my elbows on my knees, watching people move around the yard. Glenn carried a bucket toward the well. Maggie walked past him, pointing and talking like she'd done it 1,000 times. Daryl came out of the barn area wiping his hands on his pants, looking irritated at the fact that he was awake. Shane was already pacing. Of course he was. He kept glancing at me, then away, then back again, like he was waiting for me to sprout horns so he could feel justified. I looked up at him and smiled. Good morning to you too. He didn't smile back. Don't what? I asked pleasantly. Don't act like we're friends, he replied harshly. I nodded once. Okay. Co-workers. He stared at me like he wanted to argue, then just walked off toward the fence line, muttering to himself. Rick stepped onto the porch a moment later. He looked tired. Not from lack of sleep. From carrying too many decisions at once. His eyes flicked to me, then to the yard, then to the fence beyond, where nothing was moving now because I had redirected a whole lot of moving things elsewhere. He approached slowly and kept his voice low. Herschel wants to talk. You too? Sure, I said easily, standing up. I love meetings. They always go well. Rick gave me a look that was half warning, half resignation. Just, keep it straight. I raised a hand in a small salute. Straight as an arrow. He didn't laugh. He just turned and led me inside. The kitchen smelled good. Real food. Eggs. Coffee. Something frying in a pan. Beth moved quietly near the counter, avoiding eye contact with me like she was trying to decide if I was a threat or just strange. Lori sat at the table with Carl, her posture protective even while she tried to look normal. Andrea leaned back in a chair near the wall, arms crossed, watching like she didn't want to miss anything. Dale stood near the doorway, face calm but eyes very alert. Glenn hovered awkwardly by the counter, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed in this conversation but couldn't stop himself anyway. Herschel was already seated at the table. His shotgun wasn't in his hands now, but it might as well have been. His expression carried the same weight. Rick pulled out a chair and sat across from him. He gestured to the chair beside him. I sat down, relaxed, and leaned back slightly. All right. Agenda. Herschel's mouth tightened. I don't know what you are. That makes two of us, I replied lightly. Rick's voice came firm. Alex. I nodded. Right. Sorry. Herschel kept his eyes on me. What you did last night, that wasn't luck. No, I said calmly. Wasn't a trick, he continued. I shrugged. It was a trick. Just not the kind you mean. Rick's gaze sharpened. We need rules. Love rules, I said, then lifted my hands quickly when Rick's expression didn't change. Okay. I like rules when they keep people alive. Herschel folded his hands on the table. I let you inside my home. I did it because Rick asked. Because you said you'd keep those things outside. I did, I said. And you will keep doing it, Herschel said flatly. You will not bring them through my fence. Not one. Agreed, I replied without hesitation. Rick watched my face carefully. And you won't use whatever you used last night inside this farm? I blinked once. You want me to promise I won't punch your house into pieces? Shane's voice came from the doorway behind us. That'd be nice. I glanced over my shoulder. Good morning, sunshine. He looked like he wanted to bite down on a nail. Rick didn't turn. Answer. I won't, I said simply. I'm not interested in wrecking your safe spot. Herschel didn't relax. Safe spot? You talk like you're staying. I spread my hands slightly. Rick said I could. Rick nodded once, careful. As long as you follow the rules. I'm following, I replied. Herschel's eyes narrowed. You want to stay, you contribute. You don't just sit around. That's fair, I said, then pointed toward the window with my thumb. Last night counts as contributing. I'm pretty sure I just saved your fences. You're welcome. Herschel's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue the point. Rick leaned forward slightly. We also need to talk about the rest of it. The walkers outside. Where are they now? I sent them away, I said. To where? Rick asked. I shrugged. Away. Shane scoffed. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting, I replied cheerfully, then let my smile fade just a little. I'm not sending them toward people. If that's what you're thinking. I send them toward noise and stragglers in places where nobody's living. They keep moving. They don't camp. Rick's face softened slightly, just enough to show he heard the intent. You can control them from far away. Apparently, I said. Andrea spoke up, voice sharp. How far? I looked at her. Far enough. She leaned forward. That's not enough, Rick said, cutting her off. Then he looked at me again. Do you understand why we need to know? I nodded. Yet. You're worried I'm going to turn them on you. Silence. Nobody denied it. I smiled faintly. Good instincts. Shane's eyes flared. The hell is that supposed to mean? It means you should be cautious, I replied. It's working. Keep it. Rick watched me for a long moment. Then give us something. I tapped my fingers on the table once, thinking. Not because I was conflicted. Because I needed the right amount of truth that wouldn't start a fight. I won't bring them inside the fence, I said. I won't attack anyone here. I won't take supplies without asking. I'll help with guard duty, runs, whatever you need. If there's a threat coming toward this place, I deal with it outside. Herschel stared at me. And in exchange, I smiled. Food, water, a place to sleep, and nobody tries to shoot me in the face because they had a bad morning. Shane muttered, no promises. I turned my head slightly. I appreciate your honesty. Rick took a breath. If you ever decide you're leaving, I'll tell you, I said. Rick nodded. And if we ask you to leave? I leaned back and shrugged. Then I leave. Herschel's expression stayed hard, but something eased in his shoulders. Not trust. Not even acceptance. Just the recognition that I wasn't fighting him on basic boundaries. He nodded once. All right. Those are the rules. I smiled. Perfect. Herschel stood. Breakfast is for those who work. I stood too. Great. I'm starving. Beth placed a plate in front of me cautiously, eyes flicking up and down like she expected me to do something unpredictable. I gave her a friendly smile. Thanks, I said kindly. She nodded quickly and stepped away. Rick didn't sit back down. He motioned for me to follow him outside. We walked out to the porch again. The yard was brighter now, more active. People moving with tasks. Kids kept closer to the house. Rick stopped near the steps, keeping his voice low. "You meant what you said in there?" "Yeah," I replied. He studied me. "You're not telling us everything." I smiled. "Correct." Rick's jaw tightened slightly. "We've had enough surprises." I nodded once, my expression staying light but my tone turning more serious. "I get it. But you're also alive this morning. That's not nothing." He held my gaze. "Don't make me regret this." I tilted my head. "Rick, I'm the least of your problems." He didn't like that answer. He didn't argue with it either. He stepped away, heading toward Shane near the fence line. I watched him go, then turned toward the fence myself. My walkers were out there somewhere. The big group was far off. The smaller groups were working. But the ones I kept closest to the farm were sitting just outside the gate, where I'd left them, still and obedient. I walked down to the gate and stopped. Daryl appeared to my left without warning, like he enjoyed the habit of doing that. He didn't aim the crossbow at me today, but his grip stayed firm. "You gonna bring them back?" he asked. "They're right there," I replied, gesturing. "I mean the big ones," he said, eyes narrowed. "The ones you sent off?" "No," I said. He watched me. "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I don't want 100 dead things camping outside your fence like it's a concert." Daryl's mouth twisted. "Fair." I smiled. "Was that agreement?" He didn't answer. He looked past me at the walkers sitting outside the fence. "They don't move." "They move when I tell them," I said. He shifted his weight. "You ever lose control?" I looked at him. "Not yet." "That ain't an answer," he muttered. "It's the truth," I replied. He stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked off without another word. I stepped through the gate, carefully closing it behind me. Outside, the air felt a little cooler. The quiet felt different. My closest walkers turned their heads toward me. I lifted a hand. "All right. You 5. Up." They stood immediately. I paced in front of them slowly, studying. If I was going to stay around living people, I needed better tools than a single punch that shook the ground. That was useful, sure, but it was also loud, messy, and not subtle. Subtle mattered around humans. Humans didn't like feeling powerless. I glanced at the system interface briefly, careful to keep my face neutral in case anyone was watching from the fence. The XP count had climbed again. A lot again. The distant groups were still doing work. The redirected horde was also doing work. It added up fast. I breathed out quietly. "All right." I tapped into the subordinate menu. Walker 001 was still listed. So were the others. The new ones from the horde were listed too, by the hundreds. That list was already getting ridiculous. I ignored most of it and selected a handful. Walker 001, because he was already enhanced and had shown better movement. Then 4 others from my closest group, chosen for simple reasons: intact limbs, better posture, less damage to joints. I didn't need pretty. I needed functional. I allocated points carefully. Strength for 2. Speed for 1. Reaction time for another. Durability for all of them, lightly. The changes showed immediately. Walker 001's frame thickened again, shoulders widening, arms swelling under torn clothing. One of the faster ones adjusted differently, the legs tightening, posture straightening, movement less drag and more step. Their faces didn't get prettier. If anything, the added mass made the damage look worse. Skin stretched. Splits widened. Dark muscle showed through. I smirked, unable to help it. You look like a nightmare. They stood there, waiting. I walked behind them and gave the simplest test. Walk, I said. They moved forward. The difference was obvious. Still not fast like a living person running, but fast enough that a normal survivor would struggle to casually walk away. The stronger ones moved with more force, less wobble. I nodded slightly. Good. Then I tested commands. Stop. They stopped. Turn. They turned. Line, I said, gesturing. They shuffled into a rough line. Not perfect, but better than before. I tested range, focusing outward toward the distant groups. I could still sense them. I could still pull their attention. That connection stayed steady. I kept my face calm, even as satisfaction settled in. The system didn't talk, but it didn't need to. It gave me tools. I used them. I brought the 5 elites back toward the gate and left them sitting outside again. Then I stepped back inside the farm. Glenn spotted me first as he carried another bucket. He slowed, eyes darting to the gate, then back to me. So, he said awkwardly, you're really staying? Seems like it, I replied cheerfully. He hesitated, then asked what he actually wanted to ask. Are you gonna do that thing again? I smiled. Punch 100 walkers into paste. Glenn winced. Yeah. That. Only if I have to, I said. I prefer quieter solutions. He looked relieved, then confused. You have quieter solutions. I'm working on it, I replied easily. Maggie walked up behind Glenn and nudged him aside gently. She looked at me directly. My dad doesn't trust you. I noticed, I said. She kept her gaze steady. Rick doesn't either. Not fully. Fair, I replied. She glanced toward the fence, then back at me. Those things outside. They're yours. Yeah, I said. Her mouth tightened slightly. That's not normal. I'm catching that vibe, I replied lightly. She didn't smile. If any of them come near the house. They won't, I said calmly. And if they do, she pressed. I met her eyes, still relaxed, but my tone stayed firm. Then you shoot me. That's your plan. Everyone knows it. I'm aware. Her expression shifted slightly, like she didn't expect me to say it that cleanly. She nodded once. Okay. Then she walked away, leaving Glenn to stare after her. He looked back at me. You're weird. I smiled. Thank you. Later, Rick gathered people near the barn to assign tasks. He kept it normal on purpose. That was his habit. Control the chaos by making it routine. Daryl, perimeter, Rick said. Glenn, help Maggie with water. Shane. Shane cut in. I'm keeping an eye on him. Rick's eyes narrowed. You're on watch rotation. Shane's jaw worked. Fine. Rick's attention shifted to me. You. I raised an eyebrow. Me. You want to help, Rick said. You help with the fence line. Keep your walkers where we agreed. I nodded. Sure. And you don't go near the kids, Rick added, voice flat. I held up a hand. Already understood. Carl was nearby, listening, pretending not to. When my eyes flicked toward him, he looked away quickly, face slightly red. I smiled to myself and looked back to Rick. Anything else, boss? Rick exhaled sharply but didn't correct the word. That's it. I spent the afternoon outside the fence line, walking the perimeter from the outside while Daryl walked it from the inside. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Occasionally a stray walker wandered close, drawn by movement or noise. I handled them quietly, using the pipe again, keeping it simple and clean. No ground-shaking punches. No spectacle. When one dropped, I waited until nobody was looking too closely, then RESP'd it and sent it away toward the distant groups, feeding the machine without making a scene. As the sun lowered again, I stood near the gate and watched the farm settle into evening routine. Rick stood on the porch, scanning the fields. Shane lingered behind him like a shadow. Herschel stayed near the house, eyes still wary whenever he looked in my direction. I smiled faintly, hands in my pockets, posture loose. Staying here meant patience. It meant letting them adjust. It meant not pushing too fast. But it also meant if something came for them, it would have to go through me first. And I was fine with that. Chapter 8, Boots in the Brush. The morning started normal enough that I almost believed it. The porch creaked under my weight as I leaned back in the chair Herschel had reluctantly allowed me to use. Coffee sat in a chipped mug on the rail beside my elbow. It tasted like it had been made by someone who measured nothing and cared less, which made it better. The yard was already active. Glenn moved like he was trying to stay useful without getting in anybody's way. Maggie walked with purpose, giving short directions to Beth and Patricia. Daryl was out by the fence line with his crossbow, scanning the tree line like the woods had personally offended him. Shane was doing what Shane always did, which was to pace like anger was cardio. Rick stepped onto the porch and paused when he saw me. He didn't look annoyed this time. He looked like he'd slept maybe 2 hours. "You're up early," I said pleasantly. Rick exhaled. "Yeah." He walked closer, voice low. "We got a problem." I lifted the mug slightly. "We have several. Pick one." Rick's mouth tightened like he wanted to remind me to take things seriously, then he decided it wasn't worth the effort. Daryl found tracks. My expression stayed light, but my attention sharpened. "Human tracks?" Rick nodded. "Small. Barely there. Out past the creek." My memory lined it up immediately. Sophia. The woods. The way this kept eating time and patience and trust. Carol stepped out onto the porch behind Rick like she'd been waiting to hear her name. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen from crying that hadn't stopped being a habit yet. "Rick," she said quietly. Is it hers?" Rick turned slightly toward her, careful. "We don't know. But we're going out." Carol's hands clenched near her waist. "I want to come." Daryl muttered from the yard, "No." Carol flinched, then held her ground. "She's my daughter." Daryl's jaw worked. "That's exactly why." Rick raised a hand. "We're not doing this here." I took a sip of coffee and set the mug down. "Okay. Search party. How many?" Rick looked back at me. "You want in?" It wasn't a question. I smiled. "You're learning." Shane's voice carried from the yard. "No." I leaned forward a little, elbows on my knees. "Yes." Shane looked up sharply, eyes hard. I said no. I held his gaze, still calm. "I heard you. It's just not important." His nostrils flared. "You don't get to decide what's important." I nodded once. "True. Rick does." Rick looked between us like he was measuring how much noise this could turn into. "Alex." "I'll be useful," I said easily, then lifted a hand before Shane could jump in. "And I'm not bringing my walkers inside the search." Relax. I'll keep them out of sight. I'll follow your lead. Daryl spit to the side and adjusted the strap on his crossbow. You got some kinda trick for findin' people? Yeah, I said. I use my eyes. Rick's expression didn't change, but I saw the brief flicker of consideration. He needed manpower. He needed results. He also needed to keep Shane from deciding the plan was to do nothing but argue. Fine, Rick said. You stay with me. You do what I say. I stood smoothly. Love that energy. Shane stepped closer, voice low and rough. You pull anything. I walked past him like he was a fence post and didn't bother turning my head. You'll make a face and complain. Yeah, I get it. Glenn let out a quiet breath that sounded like a laugh he didn't want anyone to hear. Maggie glanced at him sharply. Glenn. He straightened. Sorry. We gathered near the edge of the yard. Rick assigned pairs the way he always did, making it sound routine so it felt less like panic. Daryl, you take the lead, Rick said. You see anything, you signal. Daryl nodded once, already moving. Shane, you're with Andrea, Rick continued. Glenn, you stick close to Maggie, help if you can. Glenn nodded quickly. Yeah. Carol stepped forward again, voice tight. Rick, please. Rick's face softened, but he kept it firm. Carol, you stay here. With Lori. With the kids. If we find something, you'll be the first to know. Carol's eyes squeezed shut. She nodded once, small and stiff, then stepped back. Lori touched her arm gently. We'll be right here. Carol didn't answer. She just stared at the tree line like staring harder might drag her daughter back. Rick looked at me. You with me? Sure, I said. Dale cleared his throat. Be careful. I glanced at him. I'm always careful. Dale's expression said he didn't believe me. He didn't argue. We moved out. The woods near the farm were thick in a way that made sound carry oddly. Leaves and branches ate noise. The ground was uneven. Muddy in places. Dry and crunchy in others. Daryl moved like he belonged to it. He didn't just walk, he listened with his whole body. Shane moved like he was forcing himself to be here instead of somewhere else. Rick kept a steady pace, eyes moving constantly, rifle held ready but not pointed at anything living. Maggie and Glenn stayed a little behind, Maggie guiding Glenn around loose roots like she'd done it before and he hadn't. I stayed near Rick, relaxed but alert. After a few minutes, Rick spoke quietly without looking at me. You got any idea how long you've been out there alone? Long enough, I replied. Rick's jaw tightened. That's what you said before. I smiled. Consistency is a good trait. He gave me a look. You keep dodging. I keep surviving, I said easily. He didn't like that. He also couldn't deny it. Daryl stopped suddenly and crouched. He pointed at the ground with 2 fingers. Rick crouched beside him. Shane and Andrea closed in. I stayed standing, scanning the brush. Daryl's voice was low. See that? Rick followed the line. Looks like a shoe print. Daryl nodded. Small. Carol's words echoed in my head even though she wasn't here. She's my daughter. Rick stood back up. All right. Spread out. Call out. Keep sight. Shane snorted. Call out? For what, so walkers know where we are? Rick's eyes narrowed. We're not doing this again. I lifted a hand slightly. I have a compromise. Rick glanced at me. What? I can send something ahead, I said calmly. Not into the group. Not near you. Just, out there. Shane's head snapped toward me. No walkers. I nodded. Not here. Not with you. Not visible. I'm talking about the edge. Daryl squinted at me. What's that mean? It means I can pull attention away from us, I said. If there's walkers clustered ahead, I can redirect them. If there's noise, I can make it. Clear paths. Lower risk. Rick studied me. Can you do that without bringing them near the farm? Yes, I said simply. Shane laughed once. And why would we trust that? I looked at him. Because last night you didn't die. That's usually a good starting point. Rick lifted a hand before Shane could blow up. Do it. But keep it controlled. Always, I said. I stepped a few paces away, out of the cluster, and focused. The connection stretched outward immediately. I could feel distant groups still moving, still hunting. I didn't need to drag a crowd toward the farm. I just needed a few units to sweep the perimeter farther out. I gave the mental command, 5. Wide arc. 2 miles. Move east. Make noise. Draw walkers away. Do not approach people. The response came like a tug smoothing into motion. I returned to Rick's side and shrugged casually. Done. Rick stared at me for a moment like he wanted to ask how. He didn't. All right. Move. We pushed deeper. The farther we went, the more the forest pressed in. The air was damp. The ground smelled like rotten water. The sound of distant walkers drifted from somewhere far left, then shifted farther away as my redirected group did its job. Glenn whispered to Maggie, "Do you think he's like, crazy?" Maggie replied quietly, "He's something." I glanced over my shoulder. I prefer helpful. Glenn flushed. I didn't. I did, I said lightly. It's fine. Rick shot me a look that said don't antagonize. I smiled at him to show I understood. We found signs here and there. A broken twig. A smear in mud. A scrap of cloth snagged on a branch that could have been anything. Then Daryl stopped again, holding up his fist. Everyone froze. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Hear that? At first I heard nothing. Then I caught it. A faint sound. Not a walker. Not a bird. A human voice, distant and thin. Rick's posture snapped into focus. Sophia. He moved fast, pushing through brush. Shane followed, then Andrea. Maggie and Glenn hurried after, Maggie keeping Glenn from tripping. I stayed with Rick, moving smoothly, stepping over fallen branches without breaking stride. The sound got clearer. Help! It wasn't Sophia. It was a man. Adult voice. Rick slowed slightly as we reached a small clearing near a shallow dip in the ground. A figure was down by a tangle of roots, half hidden by brush, one leg twisted unnaturally. He looked up as we approached, face streaked with sweat and dirt. Thank God! Thank God! Rick lowered his rifle slightly but didn't put it down. Who are you? The man swallowed. Jimmy. I was hunting. I heard yelling, I went to look then I fell. I can't move. Daryl crouched near him, eyes scanning. You ain't huntin' nothin' now. Jimmy's face tightened. Please. I'm from the farm. Herschel Green. I'm one of his hands. Rick glanced at me briefly, then back to the man. You hear a little girl? Jimmy nodded quickly. Yeah. I heard a child. I called out. Then I slipped. I didn't see her, I just heard her. Rick's expression tightened. He looked past Jimmy into the trees, scanning. Which way? Jimmy lifted a shaking hand and pointed. That way. North. I think. Shane stepped closer. We can't carry him and search. Rick's eyes narrowed. We're not leaving him. Shane's voice sharpened. And we're not finding the girl if we waste time. I stepped in casually, lifting both hands. Okay. Good news. I can solve the carry problem. Shane shot me a look. No. Rick glanced at me. What? I nodded toward Jimmy's leg. We stabilize him. Then I get him back. You keep searching. Daryl frowned. You gonna carry him? Yeah, I said. It's a hobby. Rick hesitated. You said no walkers. I said no walkers near you, I replied. I don't need them for this. Shane looked like he was about to argue again, but Rick cut him off. Fine. Daryl, you and Maggie keep searching with me. Glenn, you stay here and help him wrap that leg. Glenn blinked. Me. Maggie snapped, Glenn, do it. He swallowed and nodded quickly. Okay. Yeah. Andrea stayed with Shane, both watching the tree line while Glenn and Maggie worked. Maggie tore fabric cleanly and tied it tight. Glenn followed her directions, hands trembling slightly but doing what he was told. Jimmy winced. Careful. Careful. Glenn said nervously, I am being careful. Maggie muttered, stop talking and hold still. I crouched beside Jimmy when they finished. All right, Jimmy. I'm going to pick you up. If you scream, that's your decision. Jimmy stared at me. Who are you? I smiled. A visitor. Then I lifted him. He wasn't heavy to me anymore. Not with the way my body had been reinforced. I scooped him under one arm and stood like I'd picked up a bag of feed. Jimmy yelped. Oh, God. Yeah, I said calmly. I get that reaction a lot. Rick pointed. Head straight back. Stay off the main path. If you see anything, don't engage. Just get him home. I nodded. Got it. Shane called after me, voice sharp. If you bring walkers back. I looked over my shoulder and smiled pleasantly. If I bring walkers back, you can say I told you so. Deal. Shane's jaw tightened. He didn't reply. I carried Jimmy through the brush at a steady pace, keeping my footsteps light enough not to crack every branch. Jimmy clung to my shoulder with one hand, breathing hard. You're strong, he said shakily. Thank you, I replied cheerfully. That's not normal, he added. I've been told. He swallowed. You with Rick's group? Yeah. And the walkers outside, he said quietly. Those are yours. I glanced down at him. Jimmy, you ask a lot of questions for a guy who's upside down emotionally. He winced. Sorry. I kept moving. When the farm came into view, I slowed slightly so I didn't look like I was sprinting with a grown man under my arm. People on the porch and in the yard froze when they saw me. Herschel stepped forward first, face tightening. Jimmy. Jimmy croaked, I'm here, legs busted. Herschel hurried closer with Beth and Patricia trailing behind him. Lori stepped out too, Carl close at her side. Carol appeared behind them, eyes wide and desperate for news she didn't get. Herschel's hands moved quickly, guiding Jimmy down onto a bench. What happened? Herschel demanded. Jimmy spoke fast, breathy. I heard yelling. A child. I went looking and I fell. Carol stepped forward, voice shaking. A child? Where? Where? Jimmy looked at her, eyes widening in recognition of grief. I didn't see her. I just heard her voice. North. In the woods. Carol's knees nearly buckled. Lori caught her arm gently. Herschel looked at me sharply. Where's Rick? Still searching, I replied. They're following the direction he gave. Herschel's expression stayed hard. And you brought him back? I nodded. Alive. Herschel stared at me a moment longer, then gave a stiff nod. All right. It wasn't thanks. It wasn't trust. It was acknowledgement. Carol looked at me like I had answers. I didn't let her see what I knew. I kept my face open and calm. I'm sorry, I said quietly, tone gentler than my usual. They're looking. Carol nodded rapidly, tears spilling again. They have to find her. They have to. I know, I said. Dale approached slowly, eyes on me. You carried him like he weighed nothing. Adrenaline, I replied casually. Dale didn't buy it. He also didn't push. Time passed in restless chunks. People paced. Herschel and Patricia worked on Jimmy's leg. Beth brought water. Lori kept Carl close. Carol sat on the porch step with her hands clasped tightly together, eyes locked on the tree line. I stayed near the fence, watching outward, then back inward. I kept my walkers out of sight as agreed, stationed farther down the line where they wouldn't frighten Herschel's family. Late afternoon, Rick's group finally returned. Rick looked tired and irritated, dirt on his sleeves, sweat drying on his face. Daryl's eyes were sharp, jaw clenched. Maggie looked tense. Glenn looked relieved to see them. No Sophia. Carol stood immediately. Rick. Rick's expression softened in a way that hurt to watch. We didn't find her. Carol's breath hitched. No, you said. Rick stepped closer carefully. We found a man. Jimmy. We got him back. He heard her, but... Carol shook her head hard. Then go again. Go again. Shane stepped forward, voice hard. It's getting dark. Carol snapped, I don't care. Rick held up both hands. We go again tomorrow. First light. Carol's face crumpled, and she sank back down, shaking. Daryl looked away, jaw working, like he wanted to do something and couldn't. I stepped closer to Rick and spoke quietly so only he could hear. We're running low on supplies. Rick glanced at me, tired. What? The search is going to keep burning food and water, I said evenly. And ammo. And medical. You're going to need a run. Rick exhaled through his nose. I know. Shane immediately cut in, overhearing. We're not sending people out to town with this going on. Rick's voice stayed controlled. We don't have a choice. Herschel approached, hands still stained with work from Jimmy's leg. My farm has supplies. Rick nodded. Not enough for all of us long term. Herschel's face tightened, but he didn't deny it. Maggie said bluntly, we can do a quick run. In and out. There's a pharmacy in town. Glenn shifted, nervous. Town is, not great. Maggie glanced at him. You want food or not? Glenn swallowed. I want food. Rick looked at me. You coming? I smiled. Wasn't planning on missing the field trip. Shane's eyes narrowed. No. Rick's voice sharpened slightly. He's coming. Shane's jaw flexed. This is getting out of hand. I leaned toward him slightly, tone friendly. Shane, you say that a lot. You should put it on a shirt. He glared at me. Keep talking. I smiled. Okay. Rick turned away from us before it got worse. Glenn. Maggie. You two know the roads. Glenn nodded quickly. Yet. Daryl stepped forward. I'm goin'. Rick shook his head. I need you here for the search tomorrow. Daryl's eyes narrowed. You need me out there now. Rick held firm. Tomorrow. First light. Daryl didn't like it. He backed off. Rick looked at Andrea. You stay here. Watch rotation tonight. Andrea nodded. Fine. We settled the plan with minimal arguing after that. Everyone was too tired to fight more than necessary. As the sun dropped, I checked the gear we'd take. Bags. Water. A couple of weapons. Glenn fussed with straps like he'd never seen a backpack before. Maggie handed him a bottle. Stop shaking. I'm not shaking, Glenn lied. Maggie stared at him until he stopped. Rick approached me near the porch, voice low again. You keep it under control out there. No showing off. I smiled. You wound me. Rick didn't smile back. I mean it. My tone stayed light, but my eyes stayed steady on his. I know. If something's going to hurt your people, I'll be serious. Rick held my gaze for a moment, then nodded once. That night, the farm settled into uneasy sleep again, but there was a plan now. A search at first light. A supply run right after, before the roads got worse. I stood near the fence for a while, looking out at the dark fields, listening for anything that didn't belong. Then I turned back toward the house, where living people were trying to hold themselves together. Chapter 9, Town Noise and Barn Silence. I was awake before the first real light. Not because I was nervous. Because the house had that sound to it when people were trying not to wake each other up. Quiet footsteps. A door eased shut too carefully. Someone whispering and failing at it. I sat on the edge of the bed in the spare room Herschel had grudgingly pointed me toward, pulled my boots on, and stood. The floorboards complained anyway. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting a little. Dew clung to the grass. The farm looked peaceful in a way that felt rude. Rick was already in the yard, talking low with Daryl and Shane near the truck. Maggie stood a few steps away with Glenn, handing him something that looked like a list and watching him fumble it like paper was dangerous. Carol was on the porch steps. She hadn't gone to bed. Her shoulders were tight, hands clasped so hard her knuckles looked pale. When Rick spotted me, he nodded once. You ready? I walked over, hands in my pockets. I'm always ready. It's my thing. Shane's eyes flicked over me. He didn't say anything this time. That was progress for him. Daryl's gaze stayed on the tree line. We ain't got all day. Rick pointed with 2 fingers. Search group goes now. Run group leaves right after, as soon as we get back. I don't want people spread thin longer than we have to. Maggie stepped closer. If we're going into town, we need to move fast. There's a pharmacy and a hardware store on the same strip. Glenn nodded quickly. Yeah. Fast. In and out. I looked at Glenn. You look like you're about to apologize to the air for existing. Glenn blinked. I'm fine. Maggie stared at him. He's not fine. I'm fine, Glenn repeated, louder, like volume made it true. Rick cut in before it turned into a whole thing. Glenn, you with Maggie and Alex on the run. Daryl, Shane, you with me for the search. Shane's jaw tightened. Why him on the run? Rick didn't even look at him. Because I said so. Shane looked like he wanted to argue. Then his eyes flicked to Carol on the steps and he swallowed it. Daryl looked at me briefly. No tricks. I lifted a hand. No tricks. Just walking. Daryl didn't like that answer, but he turned away. Rick moved to Carol. He crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "We're going back out." Carol's eyes locked on his face. "Bring her back." Rick's expression tightened. "We're going to do everything we can." Carol nodded too fast. "You have to." I stood a few steps away and kept my face neutral. My chest felt tight for a second, a small leak of something I didn't bother naming, and I pushed it down. Not because I didn't care. Because I did. Rick stood and looked at the group. "Let's go." We moved into the woods. Daryl took point like always. Rick stayed close behind him. Shane stayed close behind Rick, like he was guarding him from everything, including his own decisions. I kept pace without making it obvious I could move faster. The woods were colder in the shade. The ground was damp, soft enough to hold prints. Daryl kept stopping to crouch, touch the dirt, scan branches, sniff the air like he could smell fear. Shane muttered, "We're wasting time." Rick's tone stayed flat. "We're searching." Shane shook his head. "We should be securing this place. Not playing hide and seek." Daryl snapped, "Shut up." Shane looked at him sharply. "Excuse me." Daryl didn't look back. "You heard me." Rick didn't intervene. He just kept walking. That was interesting too. After 20 minutes, Daryl slowed and lifted his fist. We stopped. He crouched and pointed at the ground. "Here." Rick crouched beside him. Shane hovered, impatient. I stayed standing, scanning outward. Rick's voice went tight. "Shoe." It was small. Dirty. The kind of kid shoe that didn't belong out here. Shane exhaled sharply. "That don't mean nothing. Kids lose shoes." Rick looked up at him, eyes narrowed. "In the middle of the woods." Daryl lifted his head and looked around. "Ain't no blood." That mattered. Rick stared at the shoe for a long second, then stood. He held it gently, like squeezing it would break something. "Keep moving," he said. "Slow. Look for more." We fanned out slightly. The next sign was a scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush. Rick paused, reached carefully, and pulled it free. It looked like a piece torn off a shirt. Small. Faded. Daryl didn't speak. He just pointed farther north. We followed. The woods opened into a shallow area near the creek. Muddy. Trampled. Tracks everywhere. Not just walkers. Horse tracks. Fresh enough that the edges weren't fully collapsed. Daryl crouched, fingers hovering over the print without touching it. "Horse." Shane frowned. "A horse out here." Rick's eyes narrowed. "Herschel's." Daryl nodded once. "Yeah. Farm folk ride." Rick's jaw worked. He looked at the tracks, then at the direction they led. The trail angled back toward the farm. Shane's voice sharpened. "So what? Some farmhand took the kid." Rick's gaze snapped to him. "Watch your mouth." "I'm saying," Shane insisted, "this means somebody else was out here. Somebody found her." Daryl looked up at Rick. "Or found her after." Rick didn't answer immediately. He stared down at the tracks again and then stood slowly. That was the moment it clicked into something useful and ugly. If Herschel's people had been out here on horseback, close enough to find her things, then there was a good chance they found her. And if they found her and didn't bring her to us, that meant one of two things. Either they didn't know who she was, or they put her somewhere we weren't allowed to see. I kept my face relaxed. I didn't need to say any of that out loud yet. Rick's eyes were already doing the same math. He looked at Daryl. You sure these go back toward the farm? Daryl nodded. Yeah. Shane scoffed. So she's there. Rick's voice stayed controlled, but it got colder. We're going back. Now. We moved fast. Daryl led. Rick followed. Shane kept close, breathing harder, not from exertion, from anger. On the way back, Rick finally spoke quietly, mostly to himself. If she's there. Shane answered like he'd been waiting. Then Herschel's been lying. Daryl muttered, or he don't see it as lying. Rick's eyes stayed forward. We'll find out. We came out of the woods and into the open field again. The farm looked the same. The people looked the same. But the air didn't. Everyone saw our faces. Carol stood up before we even reached the porch. Rick walked straight to her. He held up the shoe and the scrap of fabric. He didn't hand them to her right away. He let her see them first. Carol's face went tight, then blank, then cracked. Her hands came up slowly like she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch them. She was out there, Rick said carefully. We found this. And we found horse tracks. Fresh. Going back toward the farm. Carol's eyes widened with hope so sharp it looked painful. So she's here. Rick didn't answer that. Not directly. He turned toward Herschel, who had stepped out onto the porch and stopped dead when he saw what Rick was holding. Herschel's expression tightened. What's that? Rick's voice stayed steady. We found her shoe. We found a piece of her shirt. We found horse tracks heading back here. Herschel's jaw set. So. Shane stepped forward, voice loud. So you got your people ridin' around out there pickin' up kids and not tellin' us? Herschel's eyes flashed. Watch yourself. Rick lifted a hand slightly. Herschel. Did your people find a little girl? Herschel hesitated. It wasn't long. It was enough. I saw Rick's shoulders tighten. I saw Daryl's eyes narrow. I saw Shane's mouth pull into something sharp and satisfied, like he'd been waiting to be right. Herschel exhaled slowly. We found a child. Carol made a strangled sound and stepped forward. Where is she? Herschel looked at Carol, and for a second he looked like a man who was tired of carrying something alone. Then he hardened again. She's being kept safe, Herschel said. Rick's eyes narrowed. Safe where? Herschel didn't answer. Shane laughed once. Oh, that's perfect. Rick's voice sharpened. Herschel. Answer me. Herschel's hands tightened around the porch rail. Your guests here. Don't forget that. Rick's tone stayed controlled, but it got firm enough that everyone in the yard felt it. My people are out there risking their lives. A mother's tearing herself apart. If you have her, you tell us where she is. Herschel's face tightened. You don't understand how we do things here. Shane stepped forward again, angrier now. I don't care how you do things. You got her, you give her back. Herschel's eyes snapped to Shane. This is my farm. Rick cut in, voice low and steady. Herschel. Please. That word mattered. Rick didn't like asking. He did it anyway. Herschel held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. Not right now. Carol sobbed, loud and raw. Lori hurried to her, arms wrapping around her shoulders. Carol clutched Lori's sleeve like it was keeping her upright. Rick's jaw tightened. He looked at me for half a second, like he was checking if I was about to do something reckless. I kept my posture loose. I kept my hands visible. I didn't move. Not because I couldn't. Because this wasn't my call to make in front of them. Rick turned back to Herschel. We'll talk again. But we're doing the supply run now. We're short. And we need the day. Herschel's expression stayed hard. Fine. Shane muttered, this is bullshit. Rick didn't respond. He turned away and walked toward the truck. Maggie grabbed Glenn by the sleeve. Let's go. Glenn nodded fast. Yep. Going. I walked with them. As we moved away from the yard, Glenn finally exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since dawn. So, that went great. Maggie shot him a look. Stop talking. I smiled. He's coping. Let him cope. Maggie glanced at me. You always talk like this. Like what? I asked lightly. Like nothing's a big deal. I shrugged. Most things aren't. Maggie's eyes narrowed. This is. My smile softened just a fraction. Yet. This is. Glenn looked between us like he didn't know what to do with that. He settled on adjusting the straps on the bag he was carrying. We got into the truck. Maggie drove. Glenn sat in the middle, tense. I sat on the passenger side with my elbow against the window frame, watching the road. The drive into town was quiet at first. Fields. Broken fences. The occasional abandoned car. Glenn kept glancing behind us like he expected walkers to be sprinting after the truck. Maggie drove with both hands steady on the wheel, eyes scanning constantly. You been into town since all this? Glenn asked quietly. Maggie nodded. A few times. Glenn swallowed. Is it bad? Maggie didn't look at him. Yes. I leaned back slightly. If you see something you don't like, don't stare at it. Just move. Glenn blinked at me. That's advice. It's excellent advice, I replied. We reached the edge of town. It looked like every other dead town. Cars scattered. Storefronts broken. Posters peeling. Nothing moving until you looked closer. Then you saw the slow shifting bodies in the shade of buildings and between cars. Maggie slowed the truck. We park here. Quiet. Glenn's voice went thin. There's a lot. Yep, I said. There's always a lot. We got out. I didn't slam the door. Maggie didn't either. Glenn tried not to, but his hand shook and the latch clicked louder than he wanted. A walker's head turned at the sound, 50 yards away. Maggie hissed, "Move." We moved. The pharmacy was 2 blocks in. The hardware store was 1 block past it. We kept close to the buildings, staying off the open street as much as possible. Glenn whispered, "How are you so calm?" I glanced at him. "Practice." Maggie muttered, "Stop talking." We reached the pharmacy entrance. The glass door was cracked already. Maggie slipped inside first, knife in hand. Glenn followed, clutching his bag straps like they were armor. I stepped in last and quietly pulled the door mostly closed behind us. Inside smelled like dust and old chemicals. Shelves were partially stripped. Boxes scattered. A walker lay face down behind the counter, not moving. Maggie pointed toward the back. Painkillers, antibiotics, bandages. Anything useful. Glenn nodded and hurried to the shelves, grabbing bottles with shaking hands. I moved toward the counter, eyes on the walker. It twitched slightly as I got closer. Not fully dead. I brought my foot down on its head and ended it without noise. Glenn flinched at the sound anyway. Maggie glanced at me, then back to her shelf. Good. We filled bags quickly. Then we heard it. A low rumble outside. Not thunder. Not wind. A lot of feet dragging. Glenn froze, eyes wide. No. Maggie's face tightened. She moved to the front window and peeked through a gap in the blinds. Her voice went flat. We're surrounded. I stepped up beside her and looked. Walkers were spilling into the street from both directions. Dozens. Then more. They weren't sprinting. They didn't need to. The noise of the truck, the doors, the pharmacy, it had drawn them. Glenn whispered, "We can't go out." Maggie turned from the window, breathing controlled. Back door. Alley. Glenn nodded too fast. Okay. Alley. I lifted a hand lightly. Everyone relax. Panicking makes you loud. Glenn stared at me. How are you? Glenn, Maggie snapped, move. We moved. The back door opened into an alley choked with trash and an overturned dumpster. The air was stale and damp. We slipped out and pulled the door closed behind us. At first, it looked clear. Then a walker stepped from behind the dumpster. Glenn stumbled back, mouth open. I shoved him sideways with one hand, not gently, and the walker's grab missed him by inches. Maggie swung her knife into its head. It dropped. Glenn, Maggie said sharply, focus. Glenn nodded hard, face pale. I am. We pushed down the alley. More walkers drifted in at the far end, drawn by movement. Maggie turned to cut through a narrow gap between buildings, leading us toward a side street where the truck was parked. We rounded the corner and saw the problem immediately. The street was clogged. Walkers pressed in around cars. Some were already near the truck, hands on the door, faces turned toward it like it had food inside. Glenn's voice broke slightly. That's our truck. Maggie's jaw tightened. We can't lose it. I scanned fast. Counting. Angles. Open space. If I did what I could do, loudly, the whole town would notice. If I didn't, Glenn might die right here and Maggie would blame herself, and Rick would have one more problem he didn't deserve. I let out a slow breath and kept my voice light. Okay. Follow my lead. Maggie glanced at me. What are you doing? Cleaning up, I said. I stepped forward into the edge of the group. Not running. Just walking. The closest walker reached out. I caught its wrist and twisted, hard enough to snap the joint. It dropped with a wet sound. I drove my elbow into its skull and kept moving. Another lunged clumsily. I shoved it backward into two more, then kicked the nearest one in the head so it fell. Maggie's eyes widened slightly. Glenn stared like his brain couldn't keep up. I didn't punch the ground. I didn't shake the street. I just moved fast. Too fast for them to follow with their eyes properly, but not so fast it looked like magic from a distance. More like a man who didn't get tired and didn't hesitate. I carved a narrow path toward the truck, breaking skulls with hands, elbows, knees, whatever landed cleanest. I kept my breathing steady and my face relaxed. Behind me, Maggie pulled Glenn along. Go, I said sharply when I reached the driver's side. Now. Maggie shoved Glenn toward the passenger door. Glenn fumbled the handle, shaking, then yanked it open and scrambled inside. Maggie slid into the driver's seat. I moved around the hood as walkers pressed in again, faster now that the doors had opened. One grabbed at my sleeve. I turned and drove my palm through its face. It dropped instantly. I hopped into the passenger seat and pulled the door closed hard enough to bounce a walker's hand away. Drive, I said. Maggie hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning briefly on debris, then caught traction and surged through the thinning gap. Walkers slammed into the sides. Hands slapped the windows. Glenn curled in on himself, breathing fast. Maggie kept driving. Once we cleared the densest part, she didn't slow. She took turns hard, cutting through side roads until the noise behind us faded. Glenn finally lifted his head, eyes wide. I almost. Maggie snapped, don't. Glenn swallowed. Okay. I leaned back in the seat, calm again. Nice driving. Maggie didn't look at me. You're not normal. I've heard, I replied. Glenn looked at me carefully. You killed them with your hands. I smiled at him. You say that like it's weird. Glenn stared. It is weird. Fair, I said. We drove the rest of the way back without speaking much. As the farm came into view, something felt off. Not inside me. Outside. The air carried sound differently. Too much movement. Too many voices shouting at once. Maggie slowed the truck as we approached the gate. Then I saw why. A line of walkers was pushing out of the trees along the far field. Not 100 like last night. More. A long, uneven mass, drifting toward the property, drawn by whatever noise the morning had made and whatever noise my redirected groups had made out there. People were scrambling along the fence line. Rick's voice carried over the field, directing. Daryl moved fast near the gate with his crossbow. Shane was shouting too, louder, less controlled. Herschel stood near the porch with his shotgun, face tight. Maggie's hands tightened on the wheel. What is that? I exhaled slowly. A problem. Glenn's voice went thin again. That's a lot. Yeah, I said calmly. It is. Maggie pulled the truck inside the gate. The moment we stopped, Rick jogged over, face set. You all right? He asked quickly, eyes flicking over Maggie and Glenn. Glenn nodded too fast. Yeah. We got stuff. Rick's eyes flicked to me. Town. I shrugged. Crowded. Rick didn't have time to dig. He pointed toward the incoming mass. We got a herd coming in from the east. Bigger than what we saw last night. Herschel approached, eyes hard. This can't keep happening. Shane snapped, then stopped letting strangers with walker pets hang around. I looked at him. Good to see you missed me. Rick's voice sharpened. Not now. Herschel's gaze locked on Rick. You said you'd keep the trouble away from my land. Rick's jaw tightened. We didn't bring this. Herds move. Herschel's face stayed hard. And now it's here. I stepped forward, hands open, voice calm. All right. Everyone breathe. Yelling doesn't stop dead people. Shane turned on me. You gonna punch this one too? I smiled pleasantly. If you want to feel the house shake again, sure. Rick shot me a hard look. No. I nodded. Right. Subtle. Your favorite. Rick rubbed his face once, then forced himself back into command mode. We reinforce the fence line. We get the kids inside. We keep noise down. If they breach, we fall back to the house and vehicles. Herschel's eyes widened slightly. Vehicles. Rick met his gaze. If they breach. Herschel's jaw worked. He didn't like the implication. He also wasn't stupid. I glanced toward the field again, calculating distance and time. I could end it quickly. But if I did it the loud way again, Herschel would either throw us out or shoot me himself. Rick would lose control of the group's trust in him. Shane would use it as fuel. So I kept my tone light and practical. Give me 10 minutes outside the fence. Rick's eyes narrowed. For what? I'll thin the front, I said. Quietly. Shane scoffed. Quietly. I looked at him. Yes, Shane. with my inside voice. Rick hesitated. Then nodded once. Do it. But don't draw them toward the house. I won't, I said. I turned toward the gate. Daryl appeared beside it, already watching. You goin' out there? Yep, I said. He squinted. You mess this up. I know, I replied lightly. You'll glare at me. Daryl didn't smile, but he opened the gate just enough for me to slip through. Outside, I moved along the fence line until I was far enough that people couldn't hear me speak clearly. Then I focused. Not on the big distant groups. On the handful of elites sitting out of sight farther down. I pulled them toward me with a clean mental command. They arrived fast, moving better than any normal walker should. 5 of them. Walker 001 at the front, shoulders wide, jaw hanging, eyes dull. I gestured toward the incoming herd. All right. You guys earn your keep. They turned and moved toward the edge of the mass. I followed, not rushing, but closing the distance. When the first walkers reached the elites tore into them with efficiency that didn't look like random biting. It looked like a job. Skulls crushed. Necks snapped. Bodies dropped. I stepped in and used my hands again, fast and controlled, breaking heads cleanly, keeping noise low. No big impacts. No ground cracks. The herd kept pushing forward, but the front line started to thin. Behind me, I heard shouting from the farm, but it didn't rise into panic yet. Good. I worked steadily, keeping my breathing even, letting XP tick upward without looking at it. Every kill added to the pile I could use later. Every body could become another subordinate, but I didn't respawn here. Not near the fence. Not now. This wasn't the place to increase the fear factor. After several minutes, the herd's direction shifted slightly, drawn toward easier movement away from the fence line where the elites were funneling them. They drifted off at an angle, less pressure on the property. I stepped back, wiping my hands on my jeans, and let out a quiet breath. Then I led the elites away, farther out, and sent them to continue thinning the edges where nobody could see. When I returned to the gate, Rick was waiting, eyes fixed on the field. The herd was still there, but it was sliding away from the farm instead of pressing into it. Rick glanced at me. You did that? I nodded. Yeah. Shane stared at the shifting herd, then back at me, face tight. How? I smiled. Teamwork. Rick didn't let the conversation grow. He turned and barked orders to keep everyone moving, keep kids inside, keep vehicles ready just in case. Herschel watched the field with a grim face. Maggie walked up to him and spoke quietly. Dad. Herschel didn't answer right away. Rick turned back to me once, voice low. Town. I nodded. We got what we needed. Barely. Glenn almost got grabbed. Rick's eyes flicked to Glenn, who was still pale but standing. You okay? Glenn nodded quickly. Yep. Great. Love town. Rick exhaled once. All right. The farm stayed tense as the herd drifted farther away. Not gone. Just not smashing into the fence. People kept working like they were holding their breath. I stayed near the edge, hands in my pockets, face calm, watching Rick juggle problems he didn't ask for. He caught my eye once, just briefly, and his expression said the same thing it always did now. Don't make this harder. I gave him a small nod. I wouldn't. Not unless someone I cared about was about to die. Chapter 10, Doors that Stay Closed. By late afternoon, the farm sounded like people trying not to panic. Not screaming. Not running in circles. Just constant movement with sharp edges. Boots on wood. Tools clinking. Somebody calling out names too loudly and then lowering their voice right after. The herd was still out there, not pressing the fence anymore, but close enough that nobody could pretend it wasn't a problem. Every few minutes someone would stop whatever they were doing and stare toward the fields, like staring would change the direction of dead feet. Rick kept it together the only way he knew how. He turned it into tasks. Maggie and Glenn carried the bags from the truck into the house, laying supplies out on the table like it was a store inventory. Lori hovered near the kids, her face calm in the way that meant she was holding herself together by force. Dale moved between people, checking on them, offering short, gentle words that didn't fix anything but kept the place from tipping over. Shane stayed close to Rick, not in a supportive way. More like a pressure. Daryl kept taking short walks toward the fence line and back, never far from his crossbow, like the woods had insulted him and he needed to keep checking if it was still there. I leaned against the porch post with my hands in my pockets, watching Rick watch everything. When his eyes finally met mine, he didn't speak at first. He just nodded toward the side of the house. "Walk with me," he said quietly. I pushed off the post and followed him around the corner, away from ears. The grass was shorter here. The shade was cooler. The fence line still framed the world like a warning. Rick stopped and faced me. His expression was controlled, but the tension was obvious in his jaw. "You said you could keep threats away," he said. "I can," I replied evenly. "And that herd," he continued, glancing toward the field, "it's still close." I lifted an eyebrow. "You want me to make it not close?" Rick stared at me for a moment. "Yes. But I don't want you shaking this place apart. Herschel's already on the edge." I smiled slightly. "You're asking me to do something loud quietly." Rick didn't smile back. "I'm asking you to not make it worse." I nodded once. "Okay." He studied my face, then said the real thing. "And we're going to talk to Herschel again. About the girl." My expression stayed relaxed. My attention tightened. "Yeah," I said. "You should." Rick's eyes narrowed. "You sound like you already know something." I shrugged. "I know people hide things when they think they're right." Rick didn't like that answer. He also didn't challenge it. He glanced toward the house again, where Carol was sitting on the porch steps with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers looked stiff. "She's breaking," Rick said quietly. "I can't let that keep going." I nodded. "Then don't." Rick exhaled, then turned and started walking back toward the porch. We stepped into the yard again, and the noise of people returned around us. Glenn looked up from the table through the open front door, face pale but focused. Maggie stood beside him, pointing at supplies and talking fast. Rick didn't go inside yet. He moved toward the porch steps where Herschel stood watching the fields, shotgun resting against the rail like it belonged there. Herschel saw Rick approach and stiffened. "You need something else." Rick stopped a few feet away. "We need to talk." Herschel's face stayed hard. "We already did." Rick nodded once. "Not enough." Carol's head lifted sharply at the sound of Rick's voice. She stood, stumbling a little, then caught herself on the rail. Lori moved toward her without speaking, staying close. Daryl drifted nearer too, silent and ready. Shane stepped up on Rick's other side. I stayed a few steps back and to the side, where I could see everyone's faces without being in the center of it. It wasn't my conversation. It was my problem if it went sideways. Rick kept his voice level. "You said you found a child." Herschel's jaw tightened. "I did." Rick held the shoe and scrap of fabric in his hand like evidence. "Was it Sophia?" Carol took a step forward, voice shaking. "Please." Herschel's eyes flicked to Carol for half a second, then back to Rick. I'm not going to have this discussion in front of everyone. Shane snapped, "You're damn right you're gonna have it in front of everyone." Rick lifted a hand sharply without looking at Shane. Not helping. Shane didn't back off. He's been lying. He's been keeping her from her mother. Herschel's eyes flashed. You don't know what you're talking about. Rick's tone got firmer. Then tell us. Herschel's mouth tightened. He looked past Rick toward the yard, toward his family, toward the barn off to the side. The barn door looked the same as it always did. Closed. Quiet. Rick's eyes followed Herschel's glance. So did mine. I didn't change my expression, but a small leak of irritation pushed at the edge of my calm. Not anger. More like the simple thought that this was avoidable if people didn't get stubborn. Carol's breathing sped up. Rick, where is she? Rick didn't answer her yet. He kept his eyes on Herschel. If you have her, we take her. Now. Herschel's voice hardened. You will not start making demands in my home. Rick stepped closer, careful but steady. Herschel. It's not a demand. It's a child. Herschel's face stayed hard. You people came here with trouble. With guns. With sick. With death following you. I let you stay because I'm not cruel, but you don't get to take control. Shane laughed once, short and mean. Control. That's rich. Rick glanced at Shane, then back to Herschel. We're not taking control. We're asking you to do the right thing. Herschel's eyes narrowed. The right thing according to you. I spoke up casually from my spot, voice calm. You're making it sound like giving a kid back to her mom is complicated. Herschel's gaze snapped to me. This doesn't concern you. I smiled pleasantly. Everything concerns me if it gets people killed. Rick's shoulders tightened slightly, like he didn't want me adding fuel. But he didn't tell me to shut up. Not this time. Herschel pointed a finger at me. You're already a problem I didn't ask for. I tilted my head. Fair. Still here. Shane took a step forward, voice rising. Where is she? Herschel's grip tightened on the porch rail. Enough. Rick's voice stayed steady, but his patience thinned. Herschel. I'm giving you one last chance to tell us the truth before this gets ugly. Carol made a small sound that wasn't words, just pain. Lori whispered.